system so that they can make money without having to actually have a job?
Well, they did a study, and they said that standing out there in the heat, collecting that money the way they do, they average anywhere between 9.50 and 10.50 an hour. You can go and get a minimum wage job where you work in the air conditioning for $10 an hour now. So, when you think about it that way, there's probably not as many people as you would imagine willing to stand out there in the heat and beg for money as there are willing to work. Because the last statistic I saw is over 40% of individuals that are homeless actually are employed.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So with the census coming up in 40 years, are they going to be able to track the homeless a little bit better, do you think?
Well, there's always going to be an issue because here's the problem. Now, they've changed the definition of homelessness so many times that now currently people living in their cars might not be counted. People living under bridges might not be counted. People that are, and here's a term a lot of people don't know, it's called underhoused. People that are underhoused, meaning, for example, you might have a family of 20 living in a house that's 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have 2 or 3 families living together. So that's underhoused. They might not be counted. And then, of course, there's individuals that live in motels and hotels because that's all they can afford at the time. They might not be counted. So we're really not getting a truly accurate reflection of homelessness here in the state of Arizona because of those extenuating factors.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the other things that has been brought up time and time again, of course, is the safety of the homeless. There's a lot of crime, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of prostitution, and the stereotype, of course, is that if you're homeless, it's because you want to be homeless, or it's because you're lazy, or because you're an addict. How prevalent is that? I mean, how true is that? I mean, is it kind of like people that say that, people that are living in poverty obviously don't want to get a better job? I mean, how accurate is that assessment?
It's actually very inaccurate because anybody's one paycheck away from being houseless or homeless. I actually worked with an individual. He made over $250,000 a year. And we couldn't find him housing because of what I talked about earlier, that crime-free housing. He has a felony on his record. And so all these places wouldn't take him. But he didn't make, oddly enough, when he went to apply for a loan, they said, you don't make enough to live alone for a house that you want to live in. What people need to think about is here in Arizona, to live in a house, if you work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and you only want to spend 30% of your income on housing, that's the target goal, is 30% of your income, you have to make over $17 an hour to afford housing.
That's just pitiful.
So,
I mean, honestly, that's just horrible.
That they don't want to work or any of that. Yeah, that's horrible. And the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment here in the Maricopa County area is almost $900 a month, according to HUD. So to say that they choose to be homeless is not necessarily true. They might be working a minimum wage job, and they just can't afford rent. They're just short of it every single month. Or what happens if you find a good job, like you're a machinist or something, and you get your hand caught in the buzzsaw, and it gets chopped off, and you're disabled. And so now you're living on a disability check, but it's not enough to pay the mortgage on your home. Well, you can end up homeless.
Right.
You had a good job. You did what you were supposed to do, but because of a medical condition, you ended up homeless. Or you might have a mental health condition that is a sudden onset that's acute, and you might get to the point where you can't tell pardon the expression, but you can't tell your ass from your elbow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something you can control. So you can lose your housing because of that. You could end up in a domestic violence situation where someone's beating the heck out of you every day and you just get tired of it and you finally up and leave. You could lose your home because of that. There's so many different factors that can lead to homelessness that, people just don't wrap their heads around that, though.
Right, right, and that's something we saw back in 2011 when we were doing the Occupy stuff down there. There was several times we were down there at the Cesar Chavez Park, and we had people walk by and scream, say, "Why don't you guys just go get a fucking job?" And I'm like sitting there, I'm fully employed and everything, and they're just telling me to go get a job, and it's like I'm already employed, and just because I'm sitting here and supporting Occupy doesn't mean that I'm homeless. It doesn't mean that I don't have a job. It doesn't mean that I don't have a home or family or anything like that. And I think that there's kind of a big perception, mainstream perception about the homeless, about people who look like they're homeless, or people that support and fend for the homeless. And so, do you have any ideas on how to kind of change that overview of how people look at the homeless as because a lot of people look at the homeless as if they're parasites in the city, and that's not true, at least from my standpoint. Everybody gets down on their luck. So how do we change the perception of how we see those that need assistance, that are homeless or houseless or whatnot?
Well, there's individuals like John Linton who's doing a wonderful job with using photography to tell a story. He's using the arts. One thing I'd recommend is that you grab yourself and a couple of your friends and you go down to the Human Services campus located on 12th Avenue in Madison here in Phoenix, and check that out and see and talk to individuals and ask them about it and tour the campus and see the services it does provide for people that are much needed. So, it's really difficult to, unfortunately, anytime there's a stigma, it's hard to change it. So I'm bipolar. It's something I'm open about. It's something I tell people. And a lot of people, as soon as they hear that, they just freak out. They're like, oh, well, you could be nice to me 1 minute and you're going to just flip out on me the next second. And that's not necessarily true, but that's a stigma I deal with. And it's the same if you're houseless or homeless. I was homeless for 2 years. And people just assume I didn't want to work. They just assumed I wanted to live in the streets. They assumed I was on drugs. And that wasn't the case. I just wasn't making enough to afford housing.
And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people just don't seem to understand, is that you could be employed and just can't afford a house or an apartment or whatnot. Because, like when I was in college, I had a one-bedroom, fully furnished apartment in a college town for like $300 a month. Of course, that was 500 years ago. But still, the monetary value of apartments and living conditions and stuff like that, or living spaces and stuff like that, has gone up so much faster than income. It's like, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you could spend $100 at the grocery store and feed yourself for a month. And now that same amount of food is $300 a month or $400 a month.
Right.
Because inflation changes things, the cost of things change. And so it's not, always that a person is homeless because they're lazy or they can't, or they're a drug addict or whatnot. It's a person could be homeless just because they just don't have the money to do anything else.
Maybe because their job was shipped, I don't know, overseas or
yeah.
some shit like that. Not like that would happen in the great old USA.
Or it was automated.
Say that again?
I was saying, it was automated. That's another huge factor.
Yeah.
People are blaming all the immigrants for taking their jobs. They don't realize, well, robots are taking your jobs too, you got
Speaking
people like Wendy's and McDonald's talking about putting food in a kiosk that you order from a kiosk or you order from a vending machine,
Right, that takes the person out of it. Or like the self-checkouts at Walmart or Fry's or any of these other places. That's taking away a job that somebody could have to be able to provide for their family. And that's one of the things that I think we need to concentrate on, is trying to find a way to we're never going to be able to fix the idea that inflation has caused prices to skyrocket. Okay, a gallon of milk now is not what it was. Is 500% more than what it was 10 years ago. An apartment, the cost of an apartment 10 years ago is not even close to what it is now, even if it's non-furnished. So it's really hard in our society to understand, if you have, what it's like to not have. And I think that's the stigma that we really need to try to focus on breaking, is that just because a person doesn't have a place to live doesn't mean that they're some hopeless addict that just can't cope. It just means that they can't afford it. They don't have the ability to pay for it. Good old capitalism, right?
Good old taxes. I'm actually to an extent for taxes. But realistically, it's like, I look at
I'm not for taxes. They take a shit ton out of my paycheck.
Who's this FICA guy? He's taking all my fucking money. But I mean, seriously, you look at your check that you actually bust your ass for, and you're like, okay, well, this huge percentage is going out to taxes. To a certain extent, I agree with it, but to a certain extent, it's like, you know what? I'm thinking that if it's income tax, I don't think there should be an income tax. I mean, it's a whole different thing. Sales tax, to an extent, I think there should be, but I don't know. It's really irritating. It's like the same people that are bitching about, oh, well, these fucking people on SNAP. Well, Jesus Christ, you have a job and they take like a third of your salary to taxes, so then you have to go onto a program to qualify. Well, if they took less taxes...
Or if they paid you a living wage.
Or if there was a living wage or the whole COLA thing. When's the last time anybody got a cost of living increase?
Oh, we don't do that anymore.
But I mean, seriously, it's like you like...
Well, it's like here in Arizona. What did? We just had the legislature that denied increasing the TAMF benefits.
Of course, they all get really good benefits for being fucking public servants that we pay them for, and they don't do fucking shit.
This was the thing, you know how Representative Townsend was talking about how she regretted her decision on limiting TAMF benefits to a year. Okay, did she support extending them out to 2 years? No, the bill got killed. So, it's one of those things, she saw that she needed to be reelected and she needed people to like her. So she said what she needed to say and did what she needed to do to get people to think, oh, well, she just must have been pressured and we should still support her.
I wonder if that means she changed her views on, they're homeless people. They shouldn't be able to use EBT at stores.
No, at McDonald's.
Or at McDonald's.
Yeah.
It's like, what, if that's all that you have near you, then that's what you should be able to use. You should be able to utilize
the problem is with the EBT and the food stamp things is that people that are homeless don't have a refrigerator. They don't have a way to go shopping and actually put food away so that it does not spoil. So the only real option they have is to take their EBT card and go to a McDonald's or a convenience store that sells sandwiches like Quick Trip.
K, something,
Circle K,
yeah.
something like that. By saying, oh, well, you can't use your card, okay, now you're limiting what few resources they have to almost nothing. So what are their options? Okay, now their options are turning to theft or starving.
Yeah, I don't. People don't care. I don't care. The people that tout about family values are the same ones that are basically like, oh no, we don't want to. God forbid. You know what? Fast food is a luxury item. No, it's not. God damn it! If that's the only thing you have within a fucking 10-mile radius, and you can get stuff off the dollar menu, you know what? All the fucking power to you. It's not healthy.
Well, and that's why Arizona is what we call a food desert.
Say that again?
Arizona is what you call a food desert all over the place. Even if you're in downtown Phoenix, where a lot of our houseless individuals live, that's considered a food desert because there's no grocery stores within a reasonable distance.
Right, yeah.
There's not even convenience stores within a reasonable distance. But there's Subways down there, there's Domino's, there's things like that. So Arizona, luckily, is one of the few states that does have it where they can buy hot meals if you're houseless. And I think they might be including seniors now, too. I'm not sure. But I definitely know if you're houseless, you can get hot meals because there's no way to store it or prep food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a stove or an oven or even a camp stove or anything like that to be able to actually cook food, you don't want homeless people getting food that's raw and then trying to eat that because they're going to get sick.
Right.
Okay. But